Well, I think one of the major difficulties Donald Trump has as president is he doesn't think strategically. He doesn't have a philosophy. He doesn't think along policy terms, and he certainly doesn't think strategically. And the handling of the coronavirus pandemic tragically has reflected the utter lack of strategy, beginning in January and continuing right through until today in September. And I think it's made it much worse than it could have been and could foreshadow even more damage. You know, a lot has been done, but a list of things you're doing doesn't constitute a strategy. It hasn't necessarily been materially worse than many European countries, but I don't measure America's performance by comparing it to others. We could have done a lot better. At the beginning, Trump didn't want to hear about a virus coming from China. He did not want to hear bad news about Xi Jinping. He didn't want to hear bad news about the big trade deal that he wants. And he particularly didn't want to hear that a pandemic could harm the economy in the U.S., which he saw as his ticket to re-election. So I think we lost a lot of time at the beginning. I think we then overreacted in some cases, underreacted in others, all of which shows thinking that's far from strategic.
I mean, global politicians miss the opportunity to prepare for COVID-19. Of course, we know famously that Bill Gates had a TED talk about it a few years ago as well. Others were warning about the possibility of global pandemics. Despite the severity of this one and the highly infectious nature, actually the mortality rate, I'm being told, in terms of historical terms, is much lower than many other kind of viruses and pandemics. Do you think potentially we've got away with it this time, but next time it's going to be much worse without a preparation and perhaps a coordinated approach from the US and its allies?
Well, I think there's still a lot we don't know about this particular virus, but I think you can't trust the luck to dodge because you've got a lower mortality rate. I think there are serious ways to handle this. I think the U.S. government is set up. It has the capability, but it needs leadership. And if you have an empty chair in the Oval Office, you're going to have a worse performance than you otherwise would have. If you're only concerned about a particular threat's impact on your own political prospects, you're not going to behave in a way necessarily that protects the greater good.
And if the president were to get a second term, do you think there would be any change to that thinking? I mean, both strategically, as you mentioned, over many issues, but over very specific issues as well? Or do you think it's just going to be issue by issue on a very short-term basis?
Well, I think it's typically on a short-term basis. I'm actually worried that the second term might be worse. In the first term, as I indicate in my book, in many cases, the president came to decisions in the national security space that I agreed with, but he did it not because of the merits of the argument in favor of a particular policy, but because of the fear of the political blowback he would get domestically if he went in a different direction. After he's reelected, that political guardrail is, if it's not eliminated entirely, it's certainly minimized. And so I think the possibility for erratic decisions centered on what Trump perceives as his own personal good fortune increases, and the political pressure to move in other directions decreases.
You make a lot of comments in the book